Welcome to Global Investment Voice, your premier podcast for diving deep into the world of investment migration. Are you dreaming of a second or third passport? Then join us as we traverse the globe, exploring the ins and outs of the US EB-5 immigrant investor visa, uncover the secrets of golden visas, and delve into the many residency and citizenship by investment programs. Each episode is packed with exclusive insights from top industry experts. Whether you're an investor, developer, or a visionary entrepreneur, we're here to guide you through the complexities of global investment migration. And who better to navigate this journey with than your hosts, the dynamic legal duo of this industry, Mona Shah and Rebecca Singh. Plus, hear directly from a lineup of global investment migration leaders. So, buckle up and tune in to Global Investment Voice, where your global investment journey begins and expands.
Hello, everybody. This is Mona. While the United States has always been a destination for high net worth individuals and families, there's been one consistent factor which has always put people off coming to this country, and that's been its taxation model. And interestingly, 3 years ago this month, President Donald Trump promised to enact a pro-American tax reform, which he nicknamed at that time the One Big Beautiful Bill, and then it was the One Big Beautiful Act, or you could say OBA. This legislation is not actually called OBA. It's called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and it was signed into law July 4th, 2025. Will this new law actually encourage people coming into the United States, high net worth individuals and investors? Well, here with me today to discuss is just the perfect person, David Lesperance. David is one of the world's leading international tax and immigration advisors. He had co-authored a very key book on the impact of the movement of the wealthy on countries that they leave and to where they move to. David's personal interest in these areas of law grew from his experience working as a Canadian immigration customs officer while studying law. David has been advising high net worth families for over 3 decades on integrated tax and residence, citizenship, domicile strategies that mitigate tax and family law threats while maximizing mobility and lifestyle needs. David, welcome to Global Investment Voice.
Well, thank you for having me, Mona. It's been a while since we sat down together in Cairo.
It has, but I didn't realize Canadian immigration customs officer and a lawyer.
Well, I like to joke that, when I got called to the bar, I either saw the light or went to the dark side.
That's funny. All right. As you heard, we have this OBA, if that's what we want to call it, or you can actually call it the Tax Cuts Act. Is this enough? Is it too early, rather? Is it too early to definitively assess the long-term impact on foreign high net worth individuals coming to the United States, or is it?
Well, we all watched from the abroad the trials and tribulations going through the House and Senate versions, and the final version, I would say, it is very early, as an initial thought, is that it's favorable. It may not move the needle in a large way, but it's not negative.
Well, it was like a soap opera, I have to tell you. Yeah, I think the large needle would have been moved if it was the gold card had come in. But, there was nothing in this act for the gold card.
No, absolutely. I mean, I have been somewhat skeptical of the gold card. But that being said, I would have loved to have that tool in my toolbox for my clients, but it just didn't happen.
Was there anything during these discussions that really caught your attention?
Well, there were 2 major areas that I think people were really watching. One was what was 899, what was called the revenge tax.
Oh, yes.
And the other was a tax on remittances.
Well, the revenge tax, just enlighten our listeners.
So without fully understanding Donald Trump's approach to tariffs, and I am a Canadian. I grew up on the border, and so I'm not saying I'm de Tocqueville, but I've been watching the American experience, as PBS would call it, for my entire life.
Well, you mean you're going to be the 51st state, as we joke.
Yes, and thanks. But he was including in that tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers, and he included in that things like VAT, value-added taxes, which was a little astounding because value-added taxes is applied not just to, of course, importers, but also domestics and things. So the basis of what that number was and the continuing kind of trade and tariff proposals, what the revenge tax was saying that if any of those pursuant to Donald Trump's interpretation of a tariff was in place, that there would be a reciprocal tax paid kind of as an equalizer. Thankfully, that did not survive to the final version of the bill, which was signed into law on the 4th
That
of
would
July.
that would not have been good. And I know a little bit about the remittance tax because, it was a soap opera here for these last few weeks. But can you explain to our listeners?
Sure. So what the remittance tax was first off, who it was to be applied against, those persons who are not U.S. citizens. So that would be green card holders, non-immigrant visas, undocumented people, for example, who were sending money abroad.
That's right.
There was a whole bunch of questions as to what that was. The original House version was 5%. A Senate then went to 3%, and it was 1%. That was the final version. And I think the idea is the old adage, don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the guy behind the tree. All those people are not voters.
Yeah.
So it was a tax upon those who couldn't otherwise, have an impact on midterms or 2028 cycle of elections.
But it was the people who come in just to find work, the new immigrants and stuff. And I really didn't think that that was a good move. So I'm glad that really didn't have much of an impact here. But
and we're still kind of trying to figure out, does that, if you're a foreign investor who's investing into the United States and you want to take out your profits at the end, have you now got a 1% tax on that? And that's really, we're looking for, further clarification on exactly who got the carve-outs.
Well, but here's the other thing. As I mentioned earlier, that one of the biggest turnoffs for the U.S. is the U.S. taxation system. A taxation system which taxes the citizens on their worldwide income. There's only 2 or 3 countries in the whole world who does this. And U.S. is the only large Western country which does this. And although, the top individual income tax rate was reduced from 39% to 37%, do you think that's enough?
Well, it was made permanent, which going a little deep, under the Byrd rule, basically for the next 10 years.
Yes.
That's locked in. As is the exemption on gift and estate tax is locked in at 15 million, which would have been, close to what it would have been anyway with the inflation rates for next year. Is it enough? It's certainly attractive, and the corporate rates are attractive, and the U.S. as generally speaking, is attractive, but there are a number of other things happening in the economy which I think are going to have a much bigger impact on foreign direct investment.
Okay, that sounds ominous, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about that. But talking about the corporate rate, that one was reduced from 35% to 21%. And now I think that's very, very attractive. I mean, it's arguably a very competitive rate given what the U.S. does have to offer.
Oh, absolutely. That is very attractive. And I think that's reflects a shift in priorities as to where tax revenue is coming in, and an attempt to, and I think will be successful in bolstering corporate activities. And the hope is therefore investment, employment, and other benefits.
Yeah, but Rebecca's not on this podcast, but she will tell you just how difficult it is in other countries, like even the UK, opening up a corporation and actually doing business. In the United States, it's so simple. We can have a corporation open in hours. You can have a bank account. You can do business. You don't need to be a citizen. You don't need a US person. The ability to do business in the US is unparalleled.
Yeah, there are some jurisdictions which are trying to do that, but the key is not just being able to incorporate quickly, but to be able to open up things like bank accounts. A corporation without a bank account is a corpse. It's not
Exactly.
operational. And so you just have a whole system, an approach in the United States, which you don't have where I am in parts of Europe and certainly in the UK. I was a former non-dom in the UK and very familiar with their system. It's just much more bureaucratic and complicated. So the systems to deal with trying to weed out, anti-money laundering, KYC are just as robust in the US. They're just much more efficient in kind of getting through it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Actually, that leads me to another question that I do have for you. And very interesting, and probably we'll have to get to it on another podcast. But there was a lot of analysis done on this Tax Cuts Act. And it's arguable that this new law disproportionately benefits corporations and wealthy shareholders because apparently 35% of US corporate stock is actually owned by foreigners. And when I say foreigners, I'm talking about sovereign wealth funds, countries such as Norway, China, and Saudi Arabia. They're on the top multinational corporations that I believe own US subsidiaries.
Yeah, and the US has recognized that getting those monies, foreign monies in, whether that's in buying treasury bills or foreign direct investments in the market, is a good thing because it allows, if there is capital invested in a company, that allows them to, expand, spend money on R&D, and it doesn't matter that that money came from somebody in Wichita or from Qatar.
Yeah, it's very interesting and it really warrants further sort of discussions and analysis and stuff. There's a writer called Seth Hanlon. I believe he's from the Center of American Progress, and he has done a complete survey on this. And I think he stated, wait a minute, I have it here, that foreign investors received 134 billion in tax cuts in the last 3 years since the last tax act went into effect. And this obviously makes it more permanent. And that's about 60% more than American householders. So that's huge. But you're right; it does echo the idea of having long-term money floating into the country. It's a different way forward, I believe, but there must have been a reason that so many senators and congressmen were quiet and just allowed this to go through.
Well, and there's a recognition that if it's a Norwegian or Saudi wealth fund or a wealthy foreign person, that money will go to where it's treated best and has the greatest kind of security, rule of law, where it has the greatest possibility of stability and return of capital and the greatest return on investment, ROI. And the U.S. traditionally has been that. And so you have to look at the comparable when you're looking at kind of what will work shouldn't be what native investors would be. It's you're competing against the world. So
Yeah.
you have to look at being attractive on a global basis versus the other alternatives. And the US, one of the things that's been interesting to watch is the US is certainly the world's reserve currency. That may be challenged in future years.
Yes. Well, right now the dollar is so low.
Yeah, and so that's being watched. That's
Yeah.
another factor because effectively a devaluation of it's both an opportunity and a tax,
Yeah.
depending on which side of the trade you're on. And T-bills, those will, have certainly gone up in price on the risk return curve. And if that's perceived, depending on what the economy does in future quarters, that may go up again. Again, that's an opportunity, a risk return decision. So it is a very fluid time. And the US, in taking this approach, I think recognize that in order to get kind of more than their fair share of the world's investment dollars, they had to be internationally competitive for things like corporate rate and tax rates generally.
Yeah, I don't think enough has been made about this, but I definitely agree with you. And again, for in the long term, it just may encourage more people coming over to the US, whether through EB5 or if it ever does come out, the gold card. But just moving on, do you see anything in this act that would encourage investors who are within the US moving from state to state? Because, for example, high tax states like California and New York, we've experienced a lot of millionaires up and leaving us, going to places like Texas and Florida. Do you think there's anything in this act to encourage that?
Well, there is something called SALT, state and
Yes.
local taxes, that was impacted, and certainly, but when you look at that, that's going to impact kind of what we'll call the mass affluent market. High net worth clients or high net worth taxpayers, when they look at a state level, whether that's a California or a Washington, those people don't necessarily need to be in a specific location to make and maintain their wealth. And so there's an old saying, well, those with the broadest shoulders also have the longest legs. So
That's a good adjunct.
yeah. And so Jeff Bezos, although I'm sure he loves his parents and that's why he moved to Florida, also happened to have escaped Washington's attempt to tax him. And, whether it's going to be Elon Musk or a variety. And I have a lot of clients, for example, in Silicon Valley. And, increasingly I am calling them in Texas, Wyoming, Nevada telephone numbers. And so there is a movement from them, especially if they are going to have some major liquidity event in their future.
Yeah, I think this is a phenomena with which we have seen post-COVID across the board and not just in your high net worth categories. David, it's been a pleasure. I welcome you back after we've seen some of the outflow from this tax bill. This is still too new. We've only just got it in. But let's pick up the discussion again in a couple of months or a month or so.
I look forward to it.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of Global Investment Voice. A huge thank you to all our listeners for tuning in and sharing this journey with us. Curious about unlocking the potential of global migration and citizenship? Make sure to visit us online at mshawlaw.com and globalinvestmentvoice.com. Dive into our extensive library of podcast episodes. Stay ahead with the latest in migration news by signing up for our insider newsletter. Don't forget to connect with us on social media. Find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook to keep the conversation going. Remember, the insights shared in our podcast are for informational purposes only, so please seek tailored legal, financial, or investment advice where needed. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep investing smart and living well with Global Investment Voice. We'll see you on the next episode.